Chapter 22. The building to which Luke had been taken was only 100 kilometers or so, he guessed, from the Bothan safe house. That hadn't stayed safe for very long, had it? And he was now locked in a strongly reinforced cell. The technology here was a whole lot lower than the Bothans had been. The walls were plain, of some hard substance, a neutral gray. The heavy door was sheathed in durasteel plate, and a window at eye level was crisscrossed with metal mesh, the strands of which were as thick as his little finger. A guard pushing 2 meters tall and probably half that wide stood across the hall with a blast rifle, staring at the door. There was a heavy plastic cot bolted to the floor, with a thin pad and a blanket on it. A dim light overhead cast faint and fuzzy shadows. In one corner was a shallow depression in the floor with a fist-sized round hole in the middle of it. He had a pretty good idea what that was used for. Other than those things in himself, there was nothing in the cell. Well, it could be worse. There could be vermin. Luke sat on the cot. They'd taken his comlink and lightsaber, but they hadn't roughed him up or tortured him. Yet, anyway. Who were they? What did they want? As if in answer, the lock on the cell door clicked and the door swung inward. The Barabelle stepped into view. Luke couldn't see her very well. He was pretty sure now that it was a her. She seemed to find the darkest of the shadows as if she belonged there. Well, that didn't matter either. He could hear her well enough. "I don't suppose you want to tell me what's going on." The Barabelle made a gesture Luke interpreted as a shrug. "No reason why not. No point in being unpleasant. There's nothing you can do about it." There was a happy thought. "I am Skatul. I make my living as a bounty hunter, as do the others with me. It seems there is a large reward, a very large reward, offered to whoever delivers Luke Skywalker to them alive and well, no questions asked. Realizing what a difficult chore this might be, a group of us decided to band together. Better to have a portion of a lot of credits than none. Lucky for us, you and those blasted Bothans have increased the amounts of the shares the survivors of the attack will collect. It's the same pie, but there are now fewer of us to divide it among." Before he could speak, she continued. "Oddly enough, there is a second reward being offered for Luke Skywalker. This one is for him. You. Dead. Fortunately for you, the second amount is not quite as large as the first, so we plan to keep you healthy until we can collect it." "Here's a third option," Luke said. "How about I give you more than either bounty to let me go?" Skatul laughed, a hard-edged sound that lapped against the solid walls and bounced back at them. "Oh, certainly. We, my colleagues and I, would be open to such an offer." Here was a chance. He could borrow the credits from Leia and pay her back later. "How much are we talking about?" Skatul named a figure. "Whoa! You could buy half a city with that many credits." "With enough left over for you and 6 or 8 of your friends to retire upon and live happily ever after," the bounty hunter said. "Did we miss something in our search? You have a credit tab with that much in your pocket, perhaps?" "I wish. If Leia had that much, he'd never live long enough to pay it back, even if he made it to General. Unless he was out walking and tripped over a mountain of platinum that didn't belong to anybody. Not much chance of that." Skatul laughed. "It is good that you maintained your sense of humor." Her voice turned serious. "But be warned. Any attempt to escape will be met with maximum resistance. We know how resourceful Jedi Knights are. You are worth a few thousand more alive than dead. However, better to collect the smaller bounty than to risk losing it all. Is this understandable?" "Yeah, I get it." "Good. It's not personal, you know. Some of us even admire what you've done against the Empire, having some sympathies in that direction. But business is business. Behave yourself and you will be treated well. You'll be kept in here, but you'll be fed and unmolested until we arrange for our benefactor to pay us and collect you." You want to tell me who this benefactor is? Not to worry. You'll find out soon enough. With that, Skatul eased back through the door and shut it behind herself. Luke stared after her. Well, that was great. Captured by a bunch of bounty hunters and sold to the highest bidder. Good thing the one who wanted him dead, and who might that be, was not as generous as whoever wanted him alive. Given the money involved, he had no idea about who the latter could be. Darth Vader could throw that many credits out a window and never miss them, were the stories true. According to what he'd heard, if Vader's personal fortune was changed into credit coins and dumped in a pile, you could spend the rest of your life digging in it with a shovel and not get to the bottom. Leia sure didn't have that much. Probably the whole Alliance didn't have that much. He'd better think of something fast. He had an idea that if he stood face to face with Vader unarmed, he wasn't going to have much of a chance of surviving that meeting. Good idea, Luke. Think of something. But what? The droid who looked like a woman had hidden her ship in a small clearing centered in a vast rainforest 200 kilometers away from Avaro's casino. The ride didn't take long by land speeder, and it was just the three of them. Guri, Chewie, and Leia. Storm clouds gathered in layers of purple and gray as they arrived. The rumble of thunder followed close after the bright flashes of approaching lightning. The air had that damp, wild smell that ran before a hard rain. Leia and Chewie stared at the ship. It was a sleek, somehow almost feminine craft, shaped vaguely like a figure eight lying on its belly, bristling with guns fore and amidship, a quad of powerful-looking engines mounted aft. My vessel, the Stinger, Guri said. Very nice. Named by my master, she said. An appropriate designation. We'd better get on board before the storm gets here, Leia said. The trio started for the ship. Dash and Lando weren't particularly happy being left behind, but Leia wouldn't risk any more people than she had to. Chewie was enough. If this turned out to be what Guri and the mysterious Shizor claimed, it would be fine, assuming they got past the pickets around Coruscant and on-planet customs. If not, no point in all of them getting into trouble. Well, any more trouble than they were already in. The rain let go in earnest, and they ran for the ship. They got drenched anyhow. A couple of days had passed at least. Luke had lost track of the time, since there weren't any light except for the dim one in the cell and no transparisteel on the outside. He was practicing his levitation, hovering a few centimeters over the cot, when he heard approaching footsteps. He allowed himself to drop to the cot. He didn't want to reveal he knew how to do this. There weren't any holocams in the cell that he'd been able to detect, and the guard usually stayed across the hall. The door clicked, and Skatul dipped silently into the room. So, is my buyer paid up? Not exactly. Luke slipped off the cot and stood, facing the shorter Barabel. What does that mean? It means that after a discussion with my colleagues, we realized that you might be even more valuable than we thought. More valuable? Come on. There are two factions who want you. It was suggested that we might be able to pump up the price by playing them off against each other. Luke blinked. You're going to have them bid for me? Like a slave? Something like that. Who are these people? Skatul did something like a shrug. To be honest, we don't know. Our contacts have been very circuitous. Agents of agents of agents kind of thing. Luke couldn't think of anything to say. Of course, we must be very circumspect in our dealings. Players with the kind of money we are talking about must be very powerful. A misstep might be most dangerous. Fatal. So you solicit higher offers from them? What if the ones who want me dead come up with more credits? Like I said before, it's not personal. Just business. Luke stared at the Barabel. You'll excuse me if I take it personally. His voice was as dry as his throat had suddenly become. In his lair, Shizor smiled. Guri had the princess, and they were on their way here. Perfect. He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Sometimes it was almost disappointing how easily he accomplished his ends. It would be good to have a challenge now and then, as he had in the old days before he was master of so much. When he'd had to work a little. Ah well, better to win easily than to lose. The Emperor sat in his favorite throne, the one set a meter higher than the rest of the room. Vader entered, dropped to one knee. My master. Rise, Lord Vader. Vader did so. He hoped whatever the Emperor wanted was something easy and brief. He had just received word from his agents that Luke had been found. His captors, it seemed, were a ragtag band of bounty hunters who were demanding more money. Vader's agents knew who they were, but not precisely where they were hiding. And it seemed there was another bidder who also wanted Luke. Vader would have his people offer whatever it took. Money meant nothing when compared to the dark side, and he fully intended to turn the boy in that direction. He considered going to collect Luke himself, to Cothless, where he was reportedly being held, but to leave Imperial Center just now would be dangerous. He needed to be here to watch Shizor. The criminal's twisted plans had ensnared the Emperor, and to walk away might well be a fatal mistake. You will go to Cothless, the Emperor said, and collect young Skywalker. Once again, Vader was glad his face was masked. He had not expected to hear this. How did the Emperor know? Who in Vader's organization had betrayed him? There was no way the Emperor should be privy to that information. Not yet. Only a handful of Vader's most trusted agents knew it. Unless the Emperor was the other bidder for Luke? No, that made no sense. The Emperor had given the task to Vader. He would not enter into a bidding war against himself. I have already sent my agents for him, Vader tried. Agents are not to be trusted. Skywalker grows stronger in the Force each day. I remind you that he has within him the power to destroy us. Only you are potent enough to capture him. Yes, my master. There was no arguing with him once he'd made his mind up. Surely Prince Shizor's foul hand was involved in this. It would not be wise to bring that up. The Emperor had made it quite clear that the Dark Prince was his concern, and it would not be a good idea to reveal that Vader had plans of his own concerning Shizor. There is another reason. You are aware that Prince Shizor's scheme to allow the plans for the Death Star to fall into rebel hands has been implemented. Yes, my master. The plan proceeds over my objections. Those objections have been noted, Lord Vader. As it happens, the plans have been transported from the freighter hijacked off Bothawui to Cothless. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? That Luke and the fruits of Shizor's twisted plot were on the same planet at the same time. A coincidence? Doubtful. We must appear to make an attempt to recover the plans, the Emperor continued, to convince the rebels that the plans are genuine and that we are distressed by their loss. Therefore, your trip will serve two purposes. You can fetch Skywalker, and you can destroy some of the local scenery so that the rebels will be gulled into believing that we are concerned over the theft. He had to at least try. Any of our admirals could go and wave the flag and fire the guns. I have many pressing matters here. More pressing than my commands, Lord Vader. So much for that idea. No, my master. I thought not. I will have Skywalker with us or destroyed. The sooner the better. And the end of the rebellion is near. If you personally lead the attack, the rebels will be convinced that we think these plans of great value. Yes, my master. Vader left the chambers, and once again his simmering anger threatened to bubble up and overcome him. Shizor's touch was like a thick night fog, dark, clammy, seeping into the smallest cracks to chill and dampen. Once again he had maneuvered the Emperor into getting his rival out of the picture. With Vader uncauteless, who knew what cloying webs that reptilian spider would spin for the Emperor? Vader resolved to make it a fast trip. The call came from the picket line of Imperial Star Destroyers and frigates posted around the planet. Entry code, the board voice said. Inside the Stinger, Guri responded with a number. A moment went by. Pass. Lock into the landing grid and put it on auto. Guri operated the ship with an offhand expertise that was most impressive. She tapped controls, her hands dancing rapidly. Leia and Chewie looked at each other. They will check for contraband at customs, Guri said, as if reading Leia's mind. Black Sun has contacts there, but we cannot make it too obvious that you are under our protection. Time to go change. Chewie said something. It didn't sound happy. You wanted to come along, Leia said. He didn't like it, but he left and went to the fresher. Once the ship was on auto, Guri stood and walked to a locker. She removed some clothes and a full-head muzzle mask helmet from the locker, tossed them at Leia. Here, put these on. The clothes stank. Leia wrinkled her nose at them. Guri said, They belong to Boushh, an Ubi's bounty hunter. Boushh was quite good at the trade. He did a lot of contract work for Black Sun. He retired recently. As it happens, I speak a bit of Ubis, Leia said. We know. The costume is not a coincidence. Leia looked at the clothes. What happened to this Boushh? He retired? Quite suddenly. He tried to rascal Black Sun for more credits on a delivery for which there was an agreed-upon contract. That was unwise. The sound of the last statement gave Leia a chill. She moved to don the clothing. She had a feeling Boushh would not be needing these smelly clothes again. When Chewie returned in a few minutes, it was all Leia could do to keep a straight face. Where his fur had been brown and gray, it now was mottled with large patches of black. A raccoon-like mask encircled his eyes, and the fur on his head had been trimmed into a short spacer's cut. She turned to Guri, who said, Meet Snuva, a well-known Wookiee bounty hunter. Chewie was unhappy, and that came through in whatever it was he said. Stop complaining, Leia said. The dye will wash out and your fur will grow back. In a couple of weeks you'll be back to normal. Leia put her helmet on and tested the built-in Vox Scrambler. When she spoke, her voice was electronically altered. She knew enough UBs to get by, and as long as she didn't run into a native of that place, she should be okay. Her speech buzzed and clicked and sounded to her own ears as if it were indeed coming from an alien throat. Chewie gargled and moaned, and Guri nodded. Yes, it will do. We'll be landing soon. Leia nodded and removed the helmet. She hoped Guri knew what she was doing. And that's the end of the chapter. One little aside here on this one is I've kind of been looking forward to this part when they all get dressed, because this was part of the tie-in marketing for the Shadows of the Empire campaign when it came out. They had a whole line of action figures that included Luke in the garb that you see him in on the cover of this novel, where he's wearing the black clothes from Return of the Jedi, but also kind of a gray vest with his green lightsaber. You had Leia disguised as Boushh. You had Chewie with a crew cut and done up just like they described here, masqueraded as Snuva the Bounty Hunter. They had a Coruscant guard, which were sort of the local police force, but done in not quite a stormtrooper helmet. It was a different kind of helmet, but the armor was red. Um, they had asteroids that came out. You had a few ships, including Dash's Outrider, a whole collectible line in the Power of the Force series. If you're ever curious about Shadows of the Empire and you weren't around at the time that all of this came out, look it all up. It's kind of amazing just how much material they produced. Besides the action figures, as I mentioned before, there was a soundtrack, there were posters, there were Topps trading cards, there was the whole action figure line, there were statues, games. It was a giant effort, and it really was intended to be everything that would come along with a movie, except for the movie itself. It was an awful lot of fun, and I think that they really enjoyed this time period in particular of producing Star Wars content because it was really on the ascent once again, and everybody knew that the prequels were coming at this point, and so excitement was at an all-time high. Look up that stuff if you're interested in all the ancillary products that they were putting out in that time frame. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this chapter. I'll talk to you all again soon.